Gaming over 40, no time to play. Memories and pixels, youth's dismay. Controllers dusty, life's array. Reality one, nostalgia sway. Gaming over 40, no time to play. Memories and pixels, youth's dismay. Controllers dusty, life's array. Reality one, nostalgia sway.
Hello everyone and welcome back to another episode of Gaming Over 40. I'm your host Andy Godoy and I'm back again with another one of these podcasts slash YouTube videos that I'm doing. So anyway, in today's episode then, I'm going to be talking about one of my favorite games ever, and that is Super Castlevania IV. Now, before I tell you a little bit about the game review, the graphics and all that sort of stuff, like always, I want to reminisce and talk about all my favorite sort of like memories I've got of this game. Now, because over here in the UK, the NES wasn't as big, well, near where I grew up, as the Sega Master System, I didn't play any of the Castlevania games until years and years later. My first Castlevania experience is Super Castlevania. Now, I love this game, and that's why I feel that with the other Castlevania games, I struggled, and I'll talk about that struggle in a little bit. So, how did I find out about Super Castlevania? So, I first bought my Super Nintendo when I was working in a hotel. I was working at the Four Seasons Hotel in Park Lane. I was probably about 16. I was a bellboy or page boy, whatever you wanted to call it. So I would literally do little errands for people. I would sort of do that. And it was a summer job. So it was my sort of second sort of full-time job I had at the time. I was working pretty much 5 days a week. My mum didn't really charge me any rent or anything like that because she knew I wanted to buy myself like consoles and games. And I bought myself like, obviously it came with Super Mario World, bought myself Royal Rumble. Bought myself, I'm trying to think what other games were, Super Star Wars and a bunch of other games. But I used to buy some of the magazines. I don't know if it was Total or CMVG, but in one of these magazines, they showed this Super Castlevania IV. It was a game that was just in Japan, and I was drawn to it by the graphics. Now, I have to explain something here. Again, here in the UK, I grew up playing mostly like my Atari Junior. I ended up playing my ZX Spectrum Plus 2, Sega Master System and stuff like that. And yeah, the graphics were up from the Sega Master System, you know, from the Speccy and all the other 8-bit computers. But also, what really sort of like made me think, whoa, was like the Super Nintendo was this big console, this amazing console where the graphics were like almost arcade quality. And that was just like incredible. I think this was the point where like, I really thought, wow, I don't think graphics can get much better. Mode 7 was a thing that, you know, you played an F-Zero and it just wowed you. But anyway, going back to Super Castlevania IV, I saw this review, and the game review is pretty much how I felt about the game itself. It said like the first couple of levels, it starts off slow, it's nice graphically, it's okay. But it isn't until the later levels where the graphics really improve and start using Mode 7. Chandeliers start swinging, the rooms start rotating. And I was like, what? How is this possible? I need to experience this. So, like Street Fighter 2, which wasn't released in the UK at the time, I ended up buying myself like sort of converter. So that you'd put on a PAL sort of like a game, and then you'd get like the import game, and then you'd be able to sort of like play it. Now, I don't know the ins and outs of it technically, whether it played in full screen or whether it was still playing in PALs. That I do not remember for the life of me. I cannot remember. But I do remember that there was this video shop in Lavender Hill near Clapham Junction, and they basically imported games, and these imported games you could rent. as well. So after a while, I think the games, after they gave you the opportunity to buy them, maybe when games weren't as popular. So I ended up buying Super Castlevania 4 because I started thinking it's not being released here yet. I need to get this game. And I bought that as well as Street Fighter 2 and a bunch of other sort of like imported games. I think it was Super Ghosts and Goblins or whatever it's called in Japanese. And I bought Final Fight 2, I think. And, just like a bunch of other games. It didn't cost me that much, but I was just so happy that I had this game. So anyway, first impressions then. Loaded it up on my Super Nintendo. I say loaded it up. I placed the cartridge in, turned the power on, and then you're just greeted with this title screen that's spooky. The music is mysterious. And I'm like, oh my God, this is going to be so damn epic. And then like you're watching the story sort of unfold in front of you, and it tells you about Dracula and what's been going on. And then the game starts and you're standing in front of this castle, and then it's got this castle map and everything. And the adventure begins, and I'm like, holy crap, this game looks incredible. Honestly, after playing the Speccy, after playing the Sega Master System, after playing the Commodore 64 and the Amstrad, I hadn't experienced graphics like this. Yeah, I had seen some graphics, like in the Amiga, but I didn't really have access to the Amiga too much at that age because I think only the rich kids really had it where I lived. And so I didn't really play many games that had like 16-bit. So it was like a huge leap for me. And I forgot to mention the Super Nintendo was the first 16-bit console I owned before I even got the Sega Mega Drive. So anyway, started playing the game, and that first level is such a perfect introduction onto what is going to happen, because you're walking along and you're learning the controls. So you're whipping things, and then you realize your whip sort of flops around, and then you can swing the whip around, and then you can hit things like candles or bats that are flying around you. And it did little things like you could go inside gates, and then you'd be in the background, and you could walk around the hole, which was in the foreground. And I thought, that's ingenious. I hadn't seen anything like that before. And then later on, you start getting your power-up weapons. So the sub-weapon, and you can sort of like throw things, or you can throw an axe, a knife, and whatever else. Oh, and what about that drawbridge? Now, I think the closest I experienced to anything like this as a kid was possibly on the Sega Master System at the time, and that was Rastan. Very similar sort of platform game. You move left to right, you hit things. Although I do think Rastan's a little bit tougher than that, but the graphics were pretty good, and to me this felt like a huge upscale. I'd heard of the Castlevania games like 1, 2, I didn't know there was a 3, but I hadn't played them on the NES, like I said. I didn't own an NES at that time, and it wasn't until years later I got myself an NES, and then I started playing some of these games. But my first experience of Super Castlevania was just like dumbfounded by the graphics, the colors, the gory graphics, the blood. And I want to talk about the blood because some of the blood doesn't really appear on the PAL version, apparently. Apparently it appears as slime or something. So some of the level designs are slightly different. So I am kind of glad that I ended up playing the Japanese version. But it was little things that like this that spoilt me when it came to Castlevania. The fact that you could jump, whip, you could wave your whip around in many different directions. That really troubled me when years later I ended up playing Castlevania 1, 2 and whatever else, because you couldn't really do that in that Castlevania game, so I felt it hindered me. I would have liked to have experienced those games without the advancement of it all. And I didn't even realize that Super Castlevania 4 was a remake of the first Castlevania game, but for the Super Nintendo. Because, I mean, all the games were like Super this, Super Tennis, Super Soccer, Super Mario World. Everything had Super Smash TV. And this really did feel like it was something super. And again, what I love about this game is just the ingenious character designs, the sprites, 2D beautiful sprites, the music, the sound chip of the Super Nintendo, it has this haunting sort of organ, creepy music just playing in the background. And it's just so like, wow. And every level I got into, new things appeared, new characters. You're in a forest. Then later on, you're going down like this stream. The water starts reversing. Then later on, you're sort of just doing other things, like you're swinging from certain things to jump over. This game is just incredible. Now, I've never managed to finish it because it's very, very tough. I've managed probably to get like about 2 to 3 levels from the end. I have experienced some of the later levels, and that is due to sort of like code cheats that you could enter in the menu option. So you could skip levels and you could start on a particular level. And because of that, I experienced some of the most amazing things, like that one bit where basically you're swinging on the you're jumping onto the chandeliers, and the chandeliers are moving. And these are pretty big sprites. And what I really want to talk about is how big these sprites were, and how I never had seen anything like that on a home computer or console. The Speccy Kid couldn't do it. The Master System couldn't do it. So it wowed me. This was mode 7, and I thought it was incredible. And what about that level where you just use the whip and you're holding on, and then the whole room starts rotating, and then it just changes like the layout of the level, and it's like, oh my God. This game, it's a game that I still go back to every now and again, and it's a game that one day I'm going to just sit down properly and play it. So I think it's got the perfect sound, perfect music. I love the cave level music. The cave level music is just so haunting. It's beautiful. And again, I think it's a game of pure skill. It's just, honestly, I can't really find fault in this game, really. Maybe, I don't know, maybe it's a little bit too tough for me. But again, I didn't grow up playing the Castlevania games, so I'm not hardcore like some of the other Castlevania fans. And obviously since then, I played Rondo of Blood. I've played Castlevania Symphony of the Night, some of the Aria of Sorrow games, and some of the other Game Boy Advance games. But this still is one of my favorite, games, Castlevania games, and one of my favorite games on the Super Nintendo. So to grade this game, then I'm going to give this game a B+, because is it perfect? Nearly. It nearly is perfect. It just falls a little bit short because, yeah, I've played other games like Symphony of the Night or, Rondo of Blood, which are better, even though they're not on the Super Nintendo. But I feel this game could have done things like Bloodlines, or whatever it's called, the new generation on the Sega Mega Drive. That does a lot of good things as well for a 16-bit Castlevania game. But I would still recommend it to everyone. If you haven't got it in your collection, get it. I haven't got an actual physical form of it. I need to get it again. One of the things I do want to get myself is like a Super Nintendo Mini, and then I can sort of like have that on that there. But I mean, I love Super Castlevania. And with that then, guys, I'm going to start rounding up the show. I want to say big special thanks to everyone that has downloaded this, everyone that's liked this on YouTube. You can listen to this on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and please feel free to comment and tell me what your favorite Castlevania game is. And with that, I shall say goodbye. I have been Andy Godoy. Goodbye from me.
The SNES, gotta get my fix. Mode 7 kicking graphics in the mix. Bell lock swinging with cracking hands. 16-bit badass kids land. First level symbol just in the trophies. Skeletons cloud follow to their knees. Courtyard, open moonlight on the stone. Double jumping best, this king my own. When the good Belmont on the spree. Super Castle shadows to their dance. 16-bit harmony fades in our hands. Castlevania scream, bloodline single haunted in my dreams. God calls challenging, bosses take the shot.